Imagine waking up in a house built by your family's company, checking stocks your family owns, and seeing a skyline your family constructed. This is the insane reality of Samsung's Dynasty. And here's where it gets even stranger. Samsung didn't start in some fancy boardroom with sleek gadgets or flashy launches. Nope. It began in 1938 in Busan as a tiny trading company selling noodles, sugar, and dried fish. That's right. The Samsung we know today, worth billions, started with snacks and staples. Let me tell you about Lee Byung-chul, the founder. He wasn't born into power. Third son of a modest landowner, expected to run the family rice mill. But he had bigger plans. He packed his bags and headed to Tokyo, coming back with nothing but borrowed money and a head full of dreams. You know what's crazy? He risked everything just to sell Korean products in a country dominated by Japanese imports. He called his company Samsung, meaning 3 stars. He wanted it to last forever. And somehow, against war, occupation, and civil unrest, Samsung grew. Textiles, insurance, construction, Lee was everywhere. And as the company rose, so did tension. Powerful enemies started taking notice. He wasn't just building a business, he was carving a name, and you could feel that sense of audacity in the air. Have you ever wondered what it takes to turn rice sacks into a global empire? That's exactly where Samsung's story begins. But wait, it's about to get way more shocking. Samsung was growing fast, but South Korea itself was shaking. May 16, 1961, a coup. General Park Chung-hee rolled tanks into Seoul, dissolved the government, and said, "We're taking over." Democracy was suspended overnight, and Samsung, Lee Byung-chul's empire, suddenly had a target on its back. The military regime seized Samsung's bank, Chil Bank, accusing Lee of embezzlement and bribery. Can you imagine? One day you're building a business. The next day, the government is breathing down your neck. Most people would fight back. Lawyers flying everywhere. Not Lee. He made a choice to align with the government instead of risking everything. And here's where it gets crazy. By cooperating, Samsung got government loans, exclusive import licenses, and access to state infrastructure. They became essential partners in Park's ambitious 5-year economic development plan, turning Korea from an agrarian backwater to an industrial powerhouse. Between 1962 and 1966, Samsung expanded into textiles, food processing, logistics, insurance, basically anything the country needed. Then, in 1969, the boldest move yet, Samsung Electronics. Partnering with Japanese firms, Lee Byung-chul launched black and white TVS. Not flashy, but symbolic. Technological nationalism had begun. Suddenly, Samsung wasn't just a company. It was a symbol of Korea's future. Lee also knew power wasn't just money. He built tight relationships with generals, ministers, and politicians. The empire was growing, but so was the web of obligations that would tie Samsung to the government forever. Have you ever thought about what it means to grow a business under a dictatorship? That's the level of calculation Lee was playing with.
The late Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee, who was the country's richest man, is known to have left behind about $20 billion of assets. This includes his stocks valued at around $70 billion.
Just when it seemed Samsung had mastered Korea, a new story was waiting. 1987. Lee Byung-chul dies, and the empire passes to his son, Lee Kun-hee. On paper, he seems unlikely, soft-spoken, introverted, and obsessed with Japanese art and horses. Philosophical, almost. But don't be fooled. Behind that calm exterior was a man ruthless enough to remake an empire from scratch. By the early 1990s, Lee Kun-hee realized Samsung, despite its dominance in Korea, was a joke on the global stage. Cheap, off-brand electronics. And in 1993, during a business retreat in Frankfurt, he stunned his executives. Change everything except your wife and children. Let that sink in. He meant it literally. Factories were shut down, divisions dismantled, and employees retrained or let go. Six Sigma quality control became law. When 150,000 phones were found defective, he burned transfers, millions of dollars up in smoke. Why? The message was clear. Samsung would never be second-rate again. Lee poured billions into R&D, semiconductors, flat panels, and mobile devices. Samsung started filing thousands of patents, slowly building a global reputation. Apple, his biggest rival in the West, Lee became their manufacturer for chips. Samsung was no longer following. It was leading. Design, durability, discipline. Employees were pushed like soldiers, but with vision. Through complex cross-shareholding, Lee maintained absolute control. Samsung wasn't just a company anymore. Have you ever seen someone completely reinvent an empire in their lifetime? Lee Kun-hee did it, and the world still feels the impact today. And here's where it gets intense. By the late 2000s, Samsung wasn't just a Korean company. It was everywhere, in your living room, your pocket, your office. Its flat screens glimmered in Dubai malls, and its chips powered computers across the globe. Globally, Samsung had arrived. Domestically, eyes were finally on the king. In 2007, the bombshell hit. Kim Yong-cha, a former Samsung lawyer, went public. He claimed Samsung had built secret slush funds. Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled to bribe politicians, judges, and prosecutors. You read that right? Hundreds of millions. Korea was stunned. Samsung wasn't just a company. Some called it the Republic of Samsung, a shadow government in its own right. By April 2008, the unthinkable happened. Lee Kun-hee was indicted. Charges: tax evasion, breach of trust. Prosecutors alleged secret accounts and murky transfers. Lee Jae-yong. And here's a cultural twist you need to know. In Korea, a public apology isn't just PR, it's ritual. Lee bowed on national television, admitting wrongdoing. Days later, he resigned. The man who had turned Samsung from a microwave brand into a global powerhouse had stepped down. But let me tell you, this wasn't the end. In 2009, he was convicted, fined $100 million, and given a suspended sentence, no jail time. And then the twist. In 2010, South Korea hosted the Winter Olympics. The government needed Samsung's muscle. Lee Kun-hee, reinstated, pardoned, back in power like nothing had happened. Samsung had survived again. And Lee Kun-hee proved something profound. In Korea, being too powerful can sometimes make you untouchable. Have you ever seen a company so intertwined with a nation that its leaders' rise and fall reads like a national drama? That's Samsung in the 2000s.
Choi Soon-sil's name first appeared in the news back in September in reports about the background behind the establishment of the Mir and K-Sports foundations. Those reported were followed by bombshell news that Choi even wrote speeches for President Park and had access to the nation's highly classified information. The scandal has triggered numerous anger from the Korean public.
Just as you believe the turmoil could not become worse. Enter 2016. South Korea was rocked by a corruption case. The main character, Choi Soon-sil, a close advisor to the president, exercises great unofficial influence. And Samsung, right in the center. Prosecutors claim that heir to the Samsung empire, Lee Jae-yong, approved $38 million in bribes to Choi and her organizations in order to pass a critical merger in 2015 that cemented his control of the company. This was political maneuvering with huge consequences rather than just corporate maneuvering. Fast forward to January 2017. The Prince of Samsung is taken into custody. Imagine it. Surrounded by cameras, national attention, everywhere. A sleek, polished executive in a prison jumpsuit. The country was viewed like a live drama, every expression carefully studied. Prosecutors painted Samsung's inner circle as a criminal organization masked as a corporation. The court rendered a judgment of guilty of bribery, embezzlement, and perjury, with 5 years in prison by August 2017. Stock values fell. The kingdom shook. For a while, it appeared the dynasty might collapse. However, just 6 months after that, in February 2018, an appeals court lessened Lee's sentence and suspended some accusations, and he spent 353 days in prison. He walked free, yet the public still seemed wary. Samsung had evolved past only national pride. Reflecting the cracks in Korean democracy, it stood as a symbol of dynastic authority and influence. And the tale goes on there. In 2020, a fresh study found accounting fraud connected to the same merger. Convicted again in January 2021, quietly reporting 2.5 years in prison. Still, the administration excused him for financial reasons by August 2022. Samsung was too important to fall. Its successor was too critical to keep closed. Have you ever seen a company so entangled with a nation that its prince can fall and re-enter? This isn't business. It's a dynasty on the move. And here's where it all comes together. Sam's not just a company. It's a chaebol, a uniquely Korean family-run conglomerate woven so tightly into the country's economy that tugging one thread could unravel it all. Over 60 affiliated companies, electronics, hospitals, insurance, military tech, fashion, all under the watchful eyes of the Lee family. But control isn't about owning the most shares. It's about circular ownership, a labyrinth where subsidiary A owns part of B, B owns part of C, and C owns A again. Outsiders have no say. Only the family holds the keys. When Lee Kun-hee passed away, the empire didn't just pass to his son, Lee Jae-yong. He inherited billions and authority, a kingdom in its own right. And yes, the price was high. $10 billion inheritance tax, the largest in Korean history. To pay, the family donated priceless art, sold shares, and restructured businesses. Yet their grip never loosened. Samsung today accounts for roughly 20% of South Korea's GDP. Their influence is everywhere. The phones in your pocket, appliances in your kitchen, stadiums, hospitals, and even courtrooms. So, what's your take on this incredible saga? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into Samsung's dynasty, hit like and subscribe. I've got way more stories coming your way that show the power, intrigue, and drama behind the world's biggest empires.